Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast, podcast number 213. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the morning of Saturday, March the 27th, from the James Strong studio in western St. Charles County. Well, I have another essay this week, and it's another UFO essay. Last week, I explored the life of the grandfather of ufology, J. Allen Hynek. And this week, I'm going to go in a little bit different direction. Something not from the beginning of the UFO sightings, and I refer to the beginning as from Roswell forward, but something more recent. Fairly more recent, at least recent in my lifetime. Big story when I was in high school. And it's the strange case of Travis Walton. Travis Walton, he was the guy, the logger who was allegedly abducted by aliens, gone for 5 days, showed up mysteriously, and has been telling his story ever since. So it's always been controversial. Was he lying? Was he telling the truth? And there's a lot of reasons to believe he was telling the truth. There's a lot of reasons to believe that he was just making the whole thing up. So was Travis Walton a UFO abductee, or was Travis Walton just a Flim man? That's what we're going to dive into on this podcast. I forgot to give my sources last week, the J. Allen Hynek essay, but I have my sources this week. I'll let you know what they are for my research. The sources are the White Mountain Independent newspaper, the Huffington Post, the UK Express, the Net Worth Post, popularbio.com, and Travis Walton's book, Fire in the Sky. Now, the 1975 case of Travis Walton is one of the most controversial alien abduction stories ever. Books, movies, UFO conference appearances all followed the alleged abduction. Now, here's the story, the Travis Walton story. Much of this I got out of his book, Fire in the Sky, a first-hand account. And you can decide if this story is truth or trash. Now, on November 5th, 1975, 7 men witnessed a spacecraft from another world hovering silently between pine trees in the Apache Sitgraves National Forest in northeastern Arizona. Now, one of these men was Travis Walton, and he became an unwilling captive of an alien race when the other men fled in fear. Here's what the 7 men say about their experience. Travis Walton said, "If I had to do it all over again, I would have never gotten out of the truck." Mike Rogers, who was the foreman on the job at the time of the abduction, said, "I've been working in these woods for over 10 years, and this is the damnedest thing that's ever happened to me." In 1995, he was interviewed again, and he said, "I've been working in these woods for over 30 years, and this is still the damnedest thing that ever happened to me." This is the foreman on the job. Alan Dallas, one of the workers, said, "We couldn't believe what was happening. The horror was unreal." John Goulet, "I know what I saw, and it wasn't anything from this earth." Kenneth Peterson, "I saw a bluish light coming from the machine, and Travis went flying like he'd touched a live wire." Steve Pierce, "The ray was the brightest thing I've ever seen in my whole life." And Dwayne Smith said the UFO was smooth and was giving off a yellowish-orange light. Now, those are just quick statements by the 7 men. The following is Walton's first-hand account. On the morning of November the 5th, 1975, the 7 men were working on the Apache Sitgraves National Forest. It was an ordinary work day until the evening, and this is Travis' story. "We're working on the Turkey Springs tree thinning contract. Basically, thinning involves spacing and improving the thick strands of smaller trees to allow their faster growth. That day, November 5th, we were cutting a fuel reduction strip on the crest of a ridge. The day was done, and we were heading for home. Just then, my eye was caught by a light coming through the trees on the right, 100 yards ahead. I assumed that the glow was the sun going down in the west. Then it occurred to me that the sun had set a half hour ago. As we continued driving up the road toward the brightness, we passed inside of it for an instant. We barely got a glimpse through the gnarled branches before we rolled past an opening in the trees. What was that? I asked. The eyes strained to make sense of the glimmering through the dense strands of trees blocking our vision. From my open window, I could see the yellow brilliance washing across our path into the road another 40 yards ahead. Intrigued, I was patient to get past the intervening pines. From the driver's seat, Mike could see from the proper angle without leaning over. "What do you guys see?" he demanded curiously. Dwayne answered, "I don't know, but it looks like a crashed plane hanging in a tree." Finally, our growing excitement spurred Mike into wringing out of what was the little speed the pickup truck could get and still achieving it on the incline. We rolled past the intervening evergreen thicket where we could have an unobstructed view of the source of the strange radiance. Suddenly, we were electrified by the most awesome, incredible sight we had seen in our entire lives. "Stop," John cried. "Stop the truck." As the truck skidded to a dusty halt in the rocky road, I threw open the door for a clearer view of the dazzling sight. "My God," Alan said, "it's a flying saucer." Mike shut off the engine. We watched spellbound. The men on the left side of the truck leaned over so they could see. There, a mere 20 feet above the ground, a strange golden disc hovered silently. Our attention was riveted on the object poised in the air. Amazed by the sight, we were transfixed for one long silent moment that felt like an eternity. Less than 20 yards away, the metallic craft hung motionless, 15 feet above a tangled pile of logging slash. The craft was stationary, hovering well below the treetops near the crest of the ridge. A hard mechanical precision of the luminous vehicle was in sharp contrast to the primitive ruggedness of the dark surroundings. Its edges were clearly defined. The golden machine was starkly outlined against the deepening blue of the clear evening sky. The yellow haze from the craft dimly illuminated the immediate area with an eerie glow. Under the weird light, the encircling forest took on bizarre hues that were very different from its natural colors. The trees, the brush, the grass, all reflected subtle, peculiar new shades. I estimated the object to have had an overall diameter of 15 to 20 feet. It was 8 or 10 feet thick. The flattened disc had a shape like two gigantic pie pans placed lip to lip with a small round bowl turned upside down on the top. Barely visible at our angle of sight, the white dome peeked over the upper outline of the ship. We could see darker stripes on a dull silver sheet that divided the glowing areas into panel-like structures. The dim yellowish light given off by the surface had the luster of hot metal fresh from a blast furnace. There were no visible antennae or protrusions of any kind. Nothing that resembled a hatch, a port, or window-like structures could be seen. There was no motion, no sound from the craft. It almost appeared to be dead in the air. I was suddenly seized with the urgency to see the craft at closer range. I was afraid it would fly away, and I would miss the chance of a lifetime to satisfy my curiosity about it. I hurried out of the truck and started toward the hovering ship. The other men were alarmed by my sudden action. Placing my feet quietly, I quickly stalked closer to the mysterious vehicle. I carefully picked my way through the opening in the trees. I put my hands in my pocket in response to the cooler twilight outside the truck. I stopped walking for a long, hesitant moment. I paused and turned to look back at the 6 men staring questioningly at me. The sober realization of what I was doing shocked them. Without replying to the guys, I resolutely turned and continued toward the craft. I moved more slowly, cautiously, covering the remaining distance in a half-crouch. As I straightened up, as I entered the dim circular halo of the light softly reflecting on the ground under the craft. I was 6 feet from being directly underneath the machine. Bathed in a yellow aura, I stared up at the unbelievably smooth, unblemished surface of the curving hull. I was filled with a tremendous sense of awe and curiosity as I pondered the incomprehensible mysteries possible within. I had become barely aware of an audible sound coming from the ship. I could detect a strange blend of low and high-pitched mechanical sounds. There were intermittent high, piercing, beeping points overlaid on the distant, low rumbling sound of the heavy machinery. The strange tones were so mixed that it was impossible to compare them to any sound I could ever remember hearing. "Travis, get away from there," Mike yelled to me. I shot a fleeting look at the parked pickup truck, then turned my attention back to studying the incredible ship. Suddenly, I was startled by a powerful, thunderous swell in the volume of the vibrations of the craft. I jumped at the sound, like that of a multitude of turbine generators starting up. I saw the saucer start wobbling on its axis with a quickening motion in a pattern like an erratic spin of an unstabilized top. The same side continued to face me as the craft remained hovering approximately the same height while it wobbled. I ducked into a crouch when a tremendously bright blue-gray ray shot from the bottom of the craft. I saw and heard nothing. All I felt was the numbing force of a blow that felt like a high-voltage electrocution. The intense bolt made a sharp, cracking or popping sound. The stunning concussion of the foot-wide beam that struck me in the head and chest. My mind sank quickly into unfeeling blackness. I didn't even see what hit me. But from the instant I felt that the paralyzing blow that I did not see or feel anything more had hurt me. The men in the truck saw my body arch backwards, arms and legs outstretched, as the blow of the force lifted me off the ground. I was hurled back through the air 10 feet. They saw my right shoulder hit the rocky earth on the ridgetop. My body landed limply and motionless, spread on the ground. "It's got him," Steve yelled. Dwayne screamed, "Let's get out of here." The men gunned the truck back towards town. After a while, the embarrassed men realized that they needed to go back and get Travis. When returning to the site, they found nothing. They searched the site, calling Travis' name. They found nothing, so they got back in the truck and began the long drive back to town, Heber, Arizona. Now back to Travis. This is back from the book again, and it tells his experience after he was knocked over by the ray. My first glimmer of slowly returning consciousness brought with me a single overpowering sensation of pain. I felt badly burned all over, even inside of me. I was laying on my back. I didn't even try to move or open my eyes at first. I was so weak that if I attempted to move even my arm, I'd lapse back into unconsciousness. A bitter metallic taste covered my tongue. My mouth was dry and I was very thirsty. Oddly, the weakness in my muscles did not seem to come from hunger. The trembling felt odd, and the strange mixture of exertion and illness. Something was terribly wrong. I sluggishly dragged my eyelids open. I could see nothing. Then a blurred image began to coalesce. My eyes struggled against the agony. My eyes shifted in and out of focus. My vision slowly became clearer. The haze of light gradually solidified into an image. I could make out some kind of light source above me. The fixture was a luminous rectangle about 3 feet by 1.5 feet. The fixture was a luminous rectangle about 3 feet by 1.5 feet. The diffused light came from the flat, frosted surface of the rectangle. For an instant, I could distinguish the brushed metal luster of the ceiling in a softer reflected glow above the light. The fixture seemed to be suspended lower and closer to me than the ceiling. I deducted that the nearness of the ceiling was a hard, flat surface, and that I was lying on a raised table of some kind. The ceiling was crooked. The odd-shaped ceiling was indeed as I had perceived it, generally triangular with a base towards my feet. Suddenly, the memory of what happened before I'd blocked everything else out came rushing back with a stunning impact. I remembered standing in the clearing in the woods looking back at the glowing saucer.